talking until you tell him to be quiet. I'm sure we have other so the reason why, hello everyone, I'm telling Joel about DreamDAO. So for DreamDAO, it's high schoolers because they're of age that like if you go middle school, people might not be able to understand the technology as much, and so high schoolers are of the age where they can understand it. And it's not college because a lot of people, like when they get into like the mindset of like I'm gonna be in a bunch of student debt and like want to get in a job to kind of like justify that, it can be harder. And so we kind of found that like 15 to 20 is like the sweet spot to introduce a lot of this. But yeah, that's kind of the gist.
That's
Speaking
really
of
cool.
different ages, are there any children's books written about this stuff? And I'm curious about it both for kids, but also like Sarah, you just joined too. Welcome. You were talking about like educational outreach for people who are just basically children to the space. And it seems like a lot of children's books resonate with all of us. And there might just be some good opportunities to really convey the basics and make it seem, I think a lot of people are still just really put off by the financialization that seems to be like most of Web3 or crypto stuff when they first get into it. And it might just be a cool way to highlight more of the topics we bring up in this group. So if that doesn't exist yet, we got to make one.
I love that idea. I also think that there's like a lot of value in, I just think that like people work differently in Web3, you know, it's not like quite the same as most people work or are used to working. And so like kids books to like introduce like the younger generation to just like what it looks like to like be truly collaborative or truly decentralized would also be super valuable. I love that idea.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like we're talking so much about learning and unlearning, and it would be so much of a process just for me, excuse me, to go through it and just say like, okay, if I was relearning this whole life thing, how would I want to do that from like a Web3 approach?
Yeah, totally.
But you know, something that's I really love that idea. And something that's right. So my son is 3, he's in nursery. And like all the education he gets right now is about learning to share, learning to be with other people, learning to negotiate. And then you get into like school education, then all of that disappears and it's very individualistic. And actually, we need to go back to all the stuff that 3-year-olds are learning, like sharing, negotiation. Oh, you're on the slide. Can I go on the slide next? Like all that stuff, right?
Yeah, we gotta
And
have
it's
3-year-olds make the book. They'll teach us.
Oh, that's so true. Wow. Colton, how would you explain blockchain to a 5-year-old?
I think that's like the magic of it is though, is that I mean, maybe you can get into some like basic trust networks because I think what we're talking about is like how you scale yeah, small scale trust networks to larger scales. But I think that the cool thing about a children's book is that people aren't even tempted to dig deeper into the tech stuff. Like that's a different book. Like that stuff already exists.
I've seen on Twitter it looks like a children's book. It's like blockchain for babies, and it's like wooden shapes intersecting, like kind of like the linked list analogy. So maybe it exists. I don't know. If it was a
I
real
love
one.
that. It's a great name.
It just makes me think of those like kids toys where you have the blocks that you like move along the like wire and try to get them into the right place. And just
yeah.
like, imagine if somebody watched you do that and made sure that they remembered exactly how you did that.
It's kind of a coordination problem game, right? Like so many kids' games are coordination problem games.
You know, we are the Public Goods Library, so maybe we should be creating a book, a children's book. We're the library.
It's a very valid idea.
I definitely get behind it.
Well, now that we have a new idea, I think we can get started with the call. Yeah, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Hi everyone. If you haven't met me before, I'm Madison, and I'm going to be helping facilitate the library call today. And I'm actually, I think I told some of you this, but I'm at Refi Summit with Gary, who's over there, and Saf, who just went for a run because he's one of those crazy people who likes to go on like 2 and 3 hour runs all the time. He's like a superhuman. Anyway, so today we have a guest that is deep, deep down the rabbit hole of Web3.
It's true.
Oh, wait, hold on. Did someone say something?
No, I said it's true. It's true. I'm deep down the rabbit hole.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And he actually, which means he stays up until about 3 a.m. every night. And we met to prep for this call at 1 a.m. on Tuesday because he is an EST. But anyway, Joel is a Kernel Block 5 fellow and a software engineer. He's been researching and educating himself on blockchain technology since the summer of 2021. And he's building initial DApps for coordination around peer-to-peer food preparation and distribution. And you can follow and fork his ongoing work on his GitHub, which I will send in a second for you all to look at. And so this week we are back on Discord, and want you all to know that we'll be back on Discord by default for 99% of sessions moving forward. Only for special sessions like the one we had Aaron 2 weeks ago, we'll be on Zoom. So since we're on Discord, the call is going to be recorded, and we will be uploading it later. And if you want to chat, you can hop into the thread that Lynn posted and share articles and thoughts and all of that good stuff. But today's topic is local blockchain web architecture for community coordination, which I think is a great title. It's really exciting. And Joel will have a presentation for the first half, followed by a discussion. And I can't stay later because I'm about to head to Refi Summit, but Joel can stay later, maybe 15 to 30 minutes after, if you all have questions that you still want to ask or things you still want to talk about. And then last thing before we get started, last announcement, there's now going to be a Public Goods reading club hosted by Henry in the Common Room, and it will be on Thursday at 6:45 p.m. Eastern, and the reading will be Silence of the Commons. So you can just let me know if you're interested in that, and I can DM you all of the information, but that's this Thursday. Okay, that was the last thing. Joel, feel free to mention anything I missed, and you can go ahead and get started.
Great, thank you. Here, let me start by sharing my screen here so we can be all set up to go. Let me know, well, actually, let's go back here. Go to presenter view so I can see my slide notes. Can you see the presentation screen?
Yep, I'm good.
Excellent. Great. Yeah, thank you for the introduction, Madison. Yeah, and I just want to start off by just shouting out some thanks. Thank you, Lynn and Madison, for helping me prepare for this. Your feedback on this presentation deck was really valuable to kind of make the message a little bit clearer. It's super appreciative of that. And also shout out to my Kernel fellows. I see you in the chat, so it's good to see you, Ali, Tanaya, Anika, if you're there. It's very good to be with you all. I've been overflowing with excitement to talk about local blockchain. There's so much to talk about, and so I just want to slow down and talk about local blockchain. So local blockchain web architecture for community coordination. Let's break a little bit we're going to get into what that all means. But first, a little bit about me. Madison already introduced me. I'm a software engineer. I left Amazon in the summer of 2021, kind of part of this great resignation movement. I'm looking for to have my work have more visible impact on the community around me and leave me feeling like I actually affected the world in a better way. We're facing a lot of collective crises, and I just think this is something that's really needed. Started getting interested in crypto and kind of fell down that rabbit hole, and as I left my job, I started baking a lot, and I feel like there's so much to learn about value in the act of baking, and particularly just how these awesome food experiences are actually very affordable to make, and it's kind of all about this attentional process and the time spent doing it. And it kind of got my mind in this place of like, how can I bring these skills that I've been training in software and mobile web development and kind of like join them with this this joy and creative thing that I do, baking, and make the community a happier place to live in. Other things I enjoy, I'm really into Overwatch. I think it's a great game about team coordination, and that really inspires me a lot. You'll find me playing a lot of Overwatch 2 when that comes out. And I really love bouldering. Little bit of flavor about me. Here's a few inspirations that I have in academia and the Web3 side. Tons of great ideas that they have, and you'll probably see some, even if they aren't explicitly mentioned in this talk. And yeah, big shout out to Gitcoin. I love what they're doing, funding the open web and kernel, which I was a part of. It's been a great experience. Okay, yeah, so a little outline, what we're gonna do. Talk a little bit about the why and the what of local blockchain, sort of set out some definitions. Apologize if some of this is old news. I feel like there's a wide variance in where people are in this journey, and I'm even very early, so there's a very big chance that a lot of this is like not going to be right, but it's kind of just how I see it now, so that's what I'm presenting. And then we'll go into 3 metaphors for local blockchain, some ecological metaphors, what kernel is good at. We'll look at kind of building these metaphors into opportunities for local blockchain, both on the tech side and kind of like what it could do to our relationships and our communities. And then I'll show a little proof of concept demo of a blockchain website that I'm working on. It's very early. You're gonna have to use your imagination a lot. So just prepare for that. And then we'll hopefully get through that as fast as possible and leave time for discussion. Okay, let's hop in. So motivation is that we have a lot of collective crises that are concurrent. We have an ecological crisis. We have mental health crisis and a crisis in belonging and our feeling of being at home in the world. We have real economic crisis and supply chain crisis. And all of these things are related to one another. And one common theme in solving them is that they're going to require large-scale collective change in behaviors, changes in ways that we consume. And that's really daunting. And kind of beside these crises emerging, we also see blockchains emerging as this new technology that is already offering new possibilities for how we organize around value flows that we can now on-chain, and we can define organizational rules and boundaries. So like DAOs and NFT communities, DeFi already taking, as kind of seizing our imagination about like what are the possibilities for this space. But how do you approach this sort of like multi-crisis situation? I've found that John X from the Toucan Protocol, who led the Regen Guild in kernel, he had this way of going back to asking the question of like, what is possible to affect in your locus of control? And that I find that really inspiring, and part of the reasoning for building local blockchain. Because so there's problems with blockchain, there's barriers to adoption, and I think the biggest ones I think are that you have to currently, to participate in global blockchains, you have to purchase digital resources, and this is a financial and trust barrier for a lot of people. And it also creates a system where it doesn't seem economically viable to use these systems frequently. So if you think of like high engagement digital systems like Facebook, Instagram, you're making a lot of state-changing interactions in these applications a lot of the time. And that's just hard to imagine currently on big global blockchains. And another barrier I would say is this perception of existing Web3 solutions as being primarily financial without tangible real-world impact. I don't know that this is a correct characterization, but I think that this sort of messaging misses for a lot of people a lot of the time. So local blockchain is a way of making this real-world impact visible by inviting this low-stakes participation that doesn't require upfront financial investment. And hopefully this can both widen the audience and support the interactivity that we need to actually build effective digital systems that really can change our behaviors. and be integrated into life. Okay, enough of that. Defining a little bit of local blockchain, start with the blockchain piece. There's a lot of ways to think about what a blockchain is. Some of them are like a database, distributed ledger. You might see some wisecrack takes on Twitter saying it's an Excel spreadsheet. Maybe these are true enough in their own ways, but the analogy I like best is from Chris Dixon of A16Z, who describes blockchains as being literally shared computers. And from a theoretical standpoint, this is true because you have a shared memory space, the blockchain state, and you're able to define in a Turing complete language operations on that state using smart contracts. And to access it, you use these accounts, which are permissionless to create. Anyone can create a blockchain wallet, blockchain account. And so these are, literally shared computers. So I compare it a lot to like a local library, but as a unified computer that anyone can make a library card without being at the library. The analogy breaks down quickly, but yeah, analogies break down quickly when you're talking about blockchain. So it's distributed, so it's co-maintained by everyone who's running this blockchain program, this client program. It sort of reminds me of like a sacred flame. And in its resilience, it persists as long as one flame is lit, and so you can spread it from candle to candle, and it's always available as long as one flame is lit. So what's the local piece is local blockchain is serving communities at smaller than global scales. So like as humans, we're sort of organized in these this hole-on structure where there's holes within holes. So you have neighborhoods and cities and states, and so I imagine local blockchains as serving publics that aren't global, potentially at the multifamily level or the neighborhood level. And in local blockchain, you access the network via the local network infrastructure, so it's not the priority isn't to make it widely available on the World Wide Web, but add some sense of placement in actual space. So sort of like a coffee shop Wi-Fi network. That's currently how I have my local blockchain set up, is that you can only access it from within the Wi-Fi network. There's work to do here in actually like scaling access. We'll get into that. These nodes are operated by the community members and can be run on commodity hardware. That's a picture of my blockchain node sitting in my living room, running on a $100 computer, Raspberry Pi. Pretty cool. And once this blockchain network is set up, sort of like a public computer, it's free for builders to write new programs for, install new programs for, and create new social experiences. Okay, so why is this a good technology for doing what we're talking about? So I come back to this idea around durable web services operated at the edge that are affordable to build, use, and maintain. So let's break that down. Durable because it lasts as long as one person in the community is running a node. You could have a builder come in and add a lot of value in terms of the applications built on the network, but then they move away or their node gets squashed or something. The services will still be available to the community, which is a great feature of blockchain. It's affordable because you can effectively break your dependency on needing data center resources to run and operate your service. So no paying AWS rent, there's nobody who's getting a bill. This is advantage for a community scenario where no one really wants to be stuck with that. And you also, there's also this notion of unsiloedness of building on blockchain where your users and accounts are built in. You don't have to connect with a third-party account provider like Facebook or Google. Your users can create their own accounts and kind of just walk up and access this service. And this, I think, forms this great opportunity to onboard new participants into Web3. Because you don't need this financial investment, you can just create a wallet and start going, grab some gas and start doing things on the network. So unreached audience might be like children or elderly people or people who are very skeptical of crypto. I think there's a lot of these people, and I think they're welcome in the Web3 community. And all of this goes to, I think, form this Schelling point around local blockchain, where, and a Schelling point is this idea that in game theory, there's these options that people tend to choose in absence of communication. And one theory for why they do this is that agents imagine themselves as being part of a team, and they try to operate in a way that makes the best team possibility viable. And so in local blockchain, because it's such a slim architecture and it's so interoperable, it creates this situation where people, I think, will start to choose to build for blockchain for its potential to interoperate and kind of build this momentum around building. Okay, so a few analogies. Firstly, I have this analogy of the bicycle versus the airliner. Generally, and this is kind of like to place local blockchains in the crypto ecosystem at large. So sort of seeing the Airliner as like mainnet Ethereum, these big, robust global networks. A bicycle and an airliner are essentially doing the same thing, transporting you from A to B. But they do it in very different ways, and these intrinsic differences give them very different environmental properties, maintenance properties, safety properties. But we also kind of know that it's absurd to think of taking like a commercial airliner to go visit your neighbor. This is ridiculous. And so there's a sense that if we use the most efficient tool for the job, not only are we going to have a viable and better time, but it also might open up new possibilities that we weren't expecting. Another analogy I like to think about is like this ecosystem surrounding a tree, and the tree, I guess, would be either the Ethereum ecosystem or crypto at large. Sort of have this cast of characters. At the roots, you have this core dev mycelium layer that's communicating these values into the trunk, and you have the mev woodpecker who's poking holes in the trunk, and it branches out. There we have L2s. These are useful technologies, ZK, bridges, and critters are already building on this tree. We see DAOs, NFT communities. We also have this critter, Elon Musk, running up and down the tree. I don't know, I cast him as the squirrel because I can't really tell what he's doing. But yeah, I see this opportunity to sort of flesh out this outermost layer, this layer of leaves and flowers and fruit that is very seasonal. So it might not last as long as the tree, probably doesn't, but it also is this layer that is the most vibrant and the most nourishing and is inviting participation from the outside ecosystem, from smaller participants like the bees of the world. And yeah, I think it's important to note in this metaphor that each piece of this is important and vital, and local blockchains are trying to find a niche that is currently unmet in this entire ecosystem. Okay, last analogy is, yeah, this one's a little bit of a reach, but it's based on this fact, and I'm totally out of my depth here, biologically speaking. So yeah, in the ocean, microorganisms make up about 70% of the marine biomass. That's most of the marine biomass. It's staggering alone. And then every day, marine viruses kill 20%, a fifth of that most biomass every day. So in the ocean, you have this constant creative churning, this like selection pressure that's happening on microorganisms by these viruses. And to me, it reminds me of like deep learning or a distributed computational system. Like, think of how much adaptive evolution can happen in that process because it's at such a small scale. And so I sort of see local blockchains, like if there's a world full of many communities trying to operate local blockchains and building for local blockchains, we have like a wider selection pressure, and the experiment is just scaled horizontally to be very wide, and I think will aggregate the most good practical learnings for the entire community. All right, so yeah, this is kind of building off the sort of like bicycle analogy, but trying to describe why local blockchains are an efficient tech platform to build the social web. And I'm imagining this scenario where you have an idea, like a web app idea that helps people, and you're trying to figure out how to build it. And I kind of have gone down this path. I probably haven't gone down this path as deeply as many other people, so I'm curious to hear your insights. But one place you might go is an existing cloud platform provider like Amazon Web Services or Google Cloud. And what you'll find when you go there, this is sort of my editorialized picture. That's the real menu of AWS, but I overlaid rat's nest of wires. You'll get option overload because there's so many different building blocks that you can build your service on, and many of the pieces are doing practically the same thing. Like, databases are storing data, and there's 5 databases to choose from, and then there's 5 slightly different ways of doing compute. And every one of those choices you make as a builder starts to limit your ability to interoperate with something that's built differently. So you really need to justify building on a cloud platform, you really need to have an idea that you think can kind of take over the world, because otherwise it's not really worth investing in such a specialized solution. In blockchain, it's kind of an opinionated architecture where a lot of the pieces that you're deciding on in the cloud platform are already decided for you. So you have data persistence and replication on the blockchain, and you have this compute surface that defines the permissions for how that data can be changed and what the changes are. And then you build front ends which render this data and allow interaction in a way that's a little bit more rich, like a richer, more real-time interaction on the front end. And another thing you get in blockchain architecture is you get these user accounts built in. So you're not having to build like any interoperability layer between, like, you're not having to build on someone's third-party account providing or link. Like, yeah, just thinking of how much of a pain this is to build, like having login with both Google, Amazon, Facebook, and supporting all 3 logins. It's just a mess. Like, as an app builder, I've experienced this. Another thing you can get in the blockchain architecture is real-time notifications, because your front end and your back end, which is kind of like this, your back end is this distributed compute fabric, are so close together, you can have very real-time interactions at pretty low cost. And the biggest bonus, on top of everything, all this functionality is built into a single software executable, like the blockchain client, which is as an emergent property creating this shared computer. It's pretty incredible. Get pretty excited about that. Okay, anyways, that's a lot of tech. What can local blockchains do for our communities? And I think they can open up this kind of like I don't know, I keep thinking about the blockchain server analogy. It's kind of, or not blockchain, I keep saying that word, Minecraft server. Like, so many kids have Minecraft servers, and I feel like that is like a great like sandbox for play. And I kind of think of local blockchain as almost being like Minecraft server, but like a little bit more for real purposes. Yeah, so hubs for abundance and play. Like, what are the use cases here? So yeah, our use cases are expanded because we have inexpensive local block space. You're not like probably to distribute resources in order to pay gas fees on the blockchain network. You're distributing gas freely in some way, and that opens up a bunch of use cases where you can kind of imagine more real-time tactical coordination tools around shared human needs. So things that we've been thinking about are like tool and toy or resource libraries. I know Ali is thinking about this. She's a Kernel fellow. Childcare is another big one. These hubs for gift economy, sort of like how Buy Nothing has formed. A lot of these ideas are sort of similar, like creative reuse, like having extra materials, having extra time being king. Maybe you're managing community projects, like doing task breakdown and like allocation, voting and decision making within community. Garden keeps coming up as an interesting application. And it kind of reminds me a lot of this notion of degrowth economics. Is kind of like flipping economics on its head, and it's like maybe local blockchain is a little bit less about making product and selling it and sort of raising GDP, but it's more about like creating this appreciation of like the savings and the experience that we can have when we are working together and bringing attention to that. Okay, so tangible example, this is something I'm actually trying to build right now, something that's close to my heart. I basically live in this communal living space, and we often, like probably once to twice a week, actually tonight we're having one of these meals, we have like 10 to 20 people that are eating together. And there's just a lot of logistical challenges in bringing together a meal for that many people. Just to name a few, like often it's like unclear how many people are going to be around to eat. And that can lead to like mistakes of either kind, like you make too much or you make too little. But really, you want everyone to be fed, and you were willing to make enough food. So, that's a challenge. And then another challenge is just like making it clear like how to help and who is doing each part of the meal. So I'm sort of imagining this blockchain mechanism. It's not fully fleshed out in this picture, but may give a flavor for how I see this interaction potentially working, where when the chef wants to make a meal and kind of invite people to join in partaking of that, you can go to the local blockchain app and they'll create this meal, hopefully broadcasts it to the participants so they get a notification, they see that they're able to make a decision here. And that will sort of create this tokenized portions that are able to be claimed, again, through the blockchain web app. And that interaction is establishing both this reception from the participants to the supply. So it's kind of like supply and demand are able to negotiate here and kind of see this interaction. And so the chef could maybe adjust and make more, or maybe they realize they don't need to make as much and they make less. And then once the time comes for the meal to be eaten, you would sort of have this, it's almost ceremonial, like redeeming of the token by giving it back to the blockchain, where it can form essentially a public record of this public good. And then you eat the food. The food gets made, eat the food. It's almost so simple, but why is it useful to have a public record? Because it's useful to build awareness within the community of where the value flows happen. And with this awareness builds this internal appreciation, and that appreciation and that awareness welcomes the participation in the value flows that are happening. Like these meals are their own reward. It's not something that you necessarily need to pay someone to do. Now, I'm not necessarily like totally sour on integrating like actual money backed resources into some of these plans, but I think it's really interesting to be a little bit radical and to try to find incentives that don't even include that. So that's kind of what I'm kind of leaning into it. All right, so okay, now I want to show you, this is going to be a live demo of my little blockchain site. I hope it works. Here we go. Okay, so yeah, so I have it in a mobile browser mode. I think it looks better in a mobile. Okay, yeah, so what do you see? Welcome to Hyphen, your local blockchain kiosk. I chose this name because it's a connective, it's like a compounding punctuation, and I kind of love George Hott's kind of like insurgent creative energy with his comma AI, so it's a little bit of a riff on. So yeah, this imagined as like a local blockchain kiosk. So this could, you can access this on your phone or on your web browser, but I'm also kind of imagining the use case where this blockchain physical membrane is a place that you can go in a place that you're familiar with, like a kitchen, or maybe it's right next to the community garden, or I think that there's a lot to be thought about, like where something like this could exist. Okay, yeah, so what can you do when you come to Hyphen, your local blockchain kiosk? So you kind of have two options. One, you can scan your mobile wallet and you can kind of log in with that, or you can use this public account. And yeah, this is an interesting thing that kind of came out of thinking about the local use case, is that you really don't always care about representing yourself as you in an interaction. Like, you want to be able to just like get in, see information without having to scan your mobile signer. So yeah, once I'm logged in here, you can see that it displays my ENS name, which is house.eth for this public account. It displays the balance that I have. And this is, maybe I want to frame, there's work to do to frame the resource in the correct way to make it be viewed more as like gas and not like something that's trying to substitute as money. So yeah, the onboarding flow, because we have this open account, I have this, probably should be renamed, but this idea called a table, where it's kind of like putting money on the table open for someone to use. So this is a way of freely interacting by either giving or taking from this public account. So this will allow people without any gas in their wallet to kind of onboard themselves if somebody leaves some money on the table. And then from there, they can go and they can use the public faucet, which allows you 1 disbursement per day. When I claim the disbursement, it shows this transaction hash. A lot of this could really use some good design. It's all very bare right now. Okay, cool, confirmed. And look, the balance of ETH went up. Got the little faucet drip for the day. It won't let me do it again today. Okay, so cool. We got the gas. What can we do? Been building around recipes. Just storing recipes that we like on chain is useful. It's great to have a place to go and look at recipes that you don't have to like play whack-a-mole with ads or just like try to find where the recipe is. It's just like a consistent recipe store, and it can kind of be this vessel of culture if we keep curating it. Kind of excited for that. Yeah, so you could like edit the recipe and resubmit one with changes, and then we can kind of displaying some of this composition between apps. I'm building just this ability to kind of propose a meal on a particular day, sort of going towards what I was talking about in slides. So you could, again, the structure of this might not make 100% visual sense, but this can be improved. Yeah, so you can scale the recipe when you're adding it to a particular day. And then once the transaction goes through, I have 6-second block times right now. thinking of playing with this to make it more responsive. Yeah, so now we see that the Poolish, which is a bread starter, is already scaled with its ingredients. It shows us what step we're on. We could complete a step, see the step update. Yeah, so yeah, this just gives, I guess, a little bit of a flavor of what I'm thinking about. Lots of work to be done, lots of possibilities here. Yeah, thanks for looking at this. Okay, so let me get back to the presentation here. Okay, yeah, so open questions and challenges. I think security is a big question, like how to balance this openness and communicate to your participants, kind of like how public this is and in what way it's public. I think is a challenge, and there's a lot of work to be done. I'm really interested in the network lifecycle tools. So sort of like making it as easy as possible to start one of these networks and to onboard new nodes into a network that you start. And then also that sort of end of life piece of a network where you might want to bring a network down, but you might want to preserve some of the state in order to start a new network. I think that these, if that life cycle is figured out, that could really bolster some innovation, because we can save the state. We can basically, like, so it reminds me of like Linux images, or like different Linux distros that might have different programs installed that work variously well for different people. I think there's also this opportunity for standardizing how you package and install apps on a local blockchain. Really, I guess this could apply to any blockchain, but in the local case, it's like, since I'm a large stakes owner in this shared computer, I want this, like, I want an app store to go shopping in to like install these coordination games, these fun participatory mechanisms onto my blockchain. I think that would be really cool. Sort of like, yeah, an app store for your local blockchain. Really interested in that. And then I think cross-chain interactions are really interesting and could unlock even more possibilities. Like, what if you could bring mainnet ETH into a local blockchain and you could use it as a reward? I don't think this is right for all use cases, but I think that having that possibility could be really interesting. And yeah, I guess from here, I want to open up to discussion. Sorry, I went a little bit longer than I intended to. Here are some questions I can think of to kind of get started with, but really interested just to hear how this impacts you, what it brings up. Yeah, just thinking about like what communities are you a part of? Like what problems do these communities have? What physical locations are you like coordinating in that you could use this like blockchain companion? Is that even a viable idea? And then just like these changes in the mechanism and incentive design, I think are really interesting to think about. So yeah, I will get this presentation off the screen and we can just talk and I can answer any questions you have.
Joel, this is super cool. Thank you so much for doing this. I think, excuse me, I'm still getting over this cold. Also, great job on the live demo with no crashes.
Yeah, it all went okay.
The first thing that's really coming to mind that's interesting to me is this idea of, we've been talking a lot about the 8 forms of capital. And those are, let's see, I just pulled these back up. So things besides just financial capital, intellectual capital, experiential capital, you can think of these as like maybe the happiness level of a community. And I think one of the big questions that we're always asking is like, well, how do you actually like quantify these? How do you actually value them? And I think the state might say like, well, with like top down surveillance, like we can just have drones following people around, like see how much they smile. And if that's not the direction that we want to go in, this seems like a potential way for it to be very bottoms up and just get really high fidelity data from the community layer of like how well is childcare working in our country, right? From like the actual families on the ground floor. So yeah, that's definitely kind of an interesting thought that I'm following right now. It's great stuff.
Thanks. Yeah, I would love to hear just more thoughts. Keep them flowing. Great, Colton.
Can you actually bring the slide back up with those prompts? It'd be helpful for people.
Sure, yeah.
Actually didn't get to look at them myself. Thanks.
I'm glad to be here with Joel. You guys can hear me? Yeah.
Yep.
Maybe I'm kind of frozen. So I am sitting in my preschool classroom right now. I'm a preschool teacher who's also interested in Web3. So as you guys talk about children's books and childcare and all that, it's really interesting to me. And I think one of the things that struck me when I first heard about Joel's idea was that the storytelling, right? Like showing how value flows through a community, be it through physical objects, be it through care that we're giving for each other. So that really, yeah, that just really jumps out at me. And I think that kind of helps bring me back to the place of, it helps cut through the noise of how this technology could be used um, separately from just being about money. So I think a lot about storytelling and how we do that in early childhood. A lot of my time is spent watching children play and then documenting that play so I can share it back with families so they know why their play with Legos is more important than me giving them a worksheet. So it gives us some extra work, but the stories that we can tell at the end of it are really important. And I think the visualization of it that Joel is showing is super interesting to me. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that, the storytelling aspect. It reminds me of like Charles Eisenstein and a little bit David Graeber. Like Charles Eisenstein talks a lot about that kind of society is shaped by these shared stories that we hold as true. And I think that Ostrom has also done a lot in kind of like challenging these previously held stories, like that agents are just acting out of self-interest. Well, we discovered no, true. And so like can we form new stories around these local value flows that are real, true stories that are maybe more playful and enjoyable than other stories we might engage with?
I have a few things to share here. I am Tanaya and I am working on a project, Parents Nook. And I have been working in real communities since like last 4 years. I am a mom myself and it started out of my own need. So when we say, does childcare works in this country? So basically parenting community is suffering right at the moment. We don't have enough access to meaningful childcare, and this pandemic actually made the problems which were already there in the society pretty much visible. So working in this real physical communities and creating these physical communities, I have been talking with a lot of educators. I have been talking with parents and these people who wants to bring a change in this early childhood parenting communities. So I think, and I have been talking with Joel since last few weeks. We have been talking pretty regularly, me and Ali. So the thing is, what Joel is trying to build, I think, can be a radical change in this grassroots communities. It is needed there, like this incentive flows. Like when you are a close part of a community, you know what kind of incentive to design. Let give the community the tool to design those incentives. Don't make it top down. And then there are how can we pay the educators in a better way? So there are a lot of support system needed while we try to create a community from the bottom up. Like educators are there, but parents are not aware of those educators who are purpose aligned. So connecting them and giving them, there are a lot of scenarios arising out of there in our conversation. And I'm really excited about what Joel is building. Means maybe it would take 10, 15, 20 years for people to realize, but this is the change we need to make society a livable place for parents, educators, and the biggest thing, the children. And that way the world can be more creative. Thank you. Just my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanaya. Thank you. Yeah, super love you're doing the real work with people to onboard into this new way of living. And like, I think I would really agree with David Graeber when he says that like maybe the purpose of society is to produce people that we want to live with, and like childcare is at the center of that. Deeply needs some solutions there.
Joel, I'm curious, do you have any initial reactions to the third question in this list of questions?
Oh yeah, the mechanism and incentive design. I think, well, yeah, okay, maybe I'd say a little story of like how my ideas have evolved here. I initially started with this like general purpose game, I guess, where like the purpose of it was like recognizing value flows, so you could kind of like call out and commend some value flow in the community that you appreciate, and then there's this voting process. I had this idea to use quadratic voting to like allocate these like heart tokens between all these tasks, and then maybe award like an NFT that was like community created. And I'm still sort of interested in this idea, but I think one thing when I was just like mulling on this a lot that was kind of starting to emerge is that like there is reward that is baked into the things that you're doing without needing to sort of recognize it with an NFT. But yeah, I also think that there's like this opportunity there for these kind of like playful creations to kind of take root where I don't know. I can think of like I just have this feeling of like this like playful energy where you're like kind of like jabbing at like people in the community. It was like look at my like status in the public good of our community, or like I also think of like wearing different hats. Like it would be like great, like hats has this like avatar analogy, and like decorate it with pins of like your specialty in the community. I think that could be its own incentive.
The hats analogy in a different direction, because I'm thinking one of the things that I really want to avoid with this type of a system is like being more and more plugged in. And especially like on the community level, like you want people to be able to choose like how much are they like going through their day, like constantly logging, like how happy they are, how well this childcare thing went. Like that's like if it's really playful and this is truly like a Minecraft server, maybe a lot of people choose to be highly engaged with it, but there are also going to be a lot of people who don't want to. So kind of following that hat analogy, like maybe on the local level, you can nominate like your blockchain shaman, and like they're the ones who are super plugged in, right? And they're the ones who are actually like feeding some of this data through. And I just like that name.
I love it. Yeah, it's shaman.
Colton, what's a blockchain shaman?
Just like thinking of somebody who would choose to be actually collecting a lot of this data on the local level. It's just the name I'm referring to them with.
No, I just did not know the reference, so I wanted to make sure I get it.
Thanks. Oh yeah, just YOLO in that one.
Yeah, since I unmuted, Joel, this is beautiful. Thanks for sharing. And the questions are very poignant. I was thinking about adoption of something like that in places where technology, bandwidth, all of these things are lacking, right? So I'm thinking about, for example, villages in India, villages in South Africa, places where technology is hard to get. You might actually have a very simple cell phone and some capabilities around that, and coordination game there depends a lot about trust. So there's definitely already a community tied in, understanding each other's need in some way. How can they play coordination, and what kind of information do they need to pass through a blockchain? That can be intergenerational.
I love that vision of the potential to kind of like suddenly high tech these areas that aren't reached by fast communication channels, kind of like have an offline internet.
Mm-hmm.
Add a +1 to that. First of all, I also agree this is a really cool topic and prompt. Thanks for bringing it, Joel. The thing that you just made me think of, Anuj, was the idea behind microgrids, like how local energy grids can be put in place to kind of coordinate buying and selling electricity between neighbors in places that aren't fully served by existing grid tech, or even just to make more resilient local networks in places where they do have grid connectivity. I actually think it's like one of the more exciting use cases for blockchain in the climate solution space, like how blockchains can be used to provide electricity where it might not be already, or give people a way to like use the batteries in their cars and their homes that we're all going to have in the not too distant future. To be trading electricity with your neighbors, and sort of get rewarded for the electricity you're producing. Could be whole new revenue streams for people. There's a whole other part of this conversation around how you could finance that through DeFi protocols and things like that. But at its core, like it's really a local coordination challenge, and sort of local blockchains, could play a key role in sort of helping to facilitate that.
Oh, Joel, were you gonna say something? I can't hear you.
Well, I was
Okay.
thinking about saying something like this like notion that there's this like potential to be like funded by reciprocal momentum. It's like this: I've got your back, you've got mine, and we're living in a community where those values are like demonstrated kinetically, so that we can sort of trust that. Thinking about that resource sharing between these, sharing electricity, like I wonder about the funding models, but I'm beyond my depth thinking about that anyway.
I see people like Ab and Cell chatting. Do any of you all that are sharing things in the thread want to share verbally or have any thoughts on this?
I kind of chimed in right after Joel was done with his presentation. I'm Allie, and I just think a lot about again, like I mentioned in the chat about people over money, participation over currency, and I think in a local blockchain we're able to put the people first because we don't have to wonder, okay, like are we going to make sure that we have this big fund to move things around. And as far as motivation goes, I just wrote down what Joel said about reciprocal momentum, and I really love that phrase, like the idea that we have each other's backs, and in communities where we have to care for each other, I see endless applications. I'm not going to talk about my own specific idea that I'm working on right now, but it does have to do with childcare and resource sharing in communities, and kind of that hybrid of an IRL, URL care community. So using blockchain technology to help us care for each other in real life. So just the idea that we might not need to gamify getting people involved when they're intrinsically motivated, and it's something that betters their life and the life of their neighbors. So that's my 2 cents.
I love that IRL URL.
Yeah, one more thought just as we're closing here is I think a lot of us are really interested in experimenting more with this or with these ideas. And as we're meeting up more IRL, it'd be cool to just have like experiences, like even if you want to test that app, Joel, and like we're at some event and we're trying to coordinate an Airbnb and some meals around it. It would be fun to just like user test and start ideas from.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm trying to think about ways of how I can invite more people into testing some of these. So yeah, that's a great idea.
So we are at the hour. I have to hop off because I told you I'm going to Refi Summit, but feel free to stay on after if you have more questions you want to ask or things you want to say about this topic. And after this, I will be sending a list of the links that were shared throughout the conversation so you all can reference them after. But thank you, Joel, so much. Thank you, everyone else, for coming and bringing such great questions and conversation topics. And if you're here next week, I will see you next week.
Take care, all.
Bye.